Hello and welcome to this episode of The Real Meaning of Business. Mike Jennings and I are delighted to be joined this morning by Darren Aston of Aston & James and Ian Mundy of UHR Consultancy. Today we're looking to bring to life really some of the principles that we've been talking about using some really good examples from B4 members. The team behind The Real Meaning of Business have been working with the B4 team to come up with something that we can illustrate these sorts of things that we're talking about. So we've got a graphic to show you. Now, we've worked really on principles of other, I suppose, models, things like the B Corp movement, corporate social responsibility, blueprint for better business. And really what we wanted to highlight was that, many businesses are doing some great stuff, but don't necessarily consider all of the ways in which they can convert their businesses or evolve their businesses to have far more positive social and environmental impact. So what we thought we'd do is to have a discussion with Ian and Darren and Mike to talk about the ways in which their businesses are sort of focusing in these areas and examples of the ways in which they're developing very positive operational activities, I suppose. So where do we want to start? Who wants to chip in first?
I'm happy to comment if you like. From an Aston & James position in supporting the Oxfordshire-based business community, we've adopted ways of delivering and collecting goods whilst on site with those customers. So what we call a kind of full cycle service. Certain customers over the last few years, Jennings as an example, we've engaged with Jennings and the Monument Business Park to create an eco delivery platform where customers on that site will have deliveries on dedicated days to increase efficiency, reduce carbon emissions, and basically everybody knows when stuff's coming. So it's not multiple vans and multiple vehicles turning up on multiple days back to back. For us engaging with Jennings, it was easy to implement, and obviously it's something that we both wanted to achieve: cost efficiency, eco kind of creation of good in business, really.
And are you finding that that's sort of an increasing demand from customers, Darren? I mean, clearly you saw it as a good opportunity, and you've got some customers, but increasingly are we seeing more businesses taking, if you like, looking at a more responsible and environmentally friendly approach to purchasing?
Yeah, I think certainly like a lot of businesses, the pandemic's fast-tracked a lot of ideas, and principles of those ideas have now been implemented as part of our kind of presentation to customers, but also understanding the wants and needs of their eco goals, their green goals, if that's something that the business or the customer has actually shared with us. We've actually done over the last year, we've done some engagement with Blenheim, and one of the goals for them was to reduce the deliveries, keep with local suppliers, buy local, and that for us is it's an absolute match made in heaven. Because we want to stay local, we want to optimize our fleet and deliver green, and where possible build orders so that we're not delivering one stapler or one box of paper. So actually in delivering a presentation of how we add value, instead of it all being about price and all being about product range, actually just been about how we go about doing business together, and making sure that we're on the same aligned path with their goals, which is important to us because as a family values, family sort of led business, we care about our community, we care about the people, we employ local people, we buy local, we want to sell locally, support locally. So it's been a really good thing to be able to deliver that in a format that's been fast-tracked. And I suppose now we're on a nice sort of single track and a focus track at delivering more of the same services and solutions to those customers, because it works, and what's not to like.
I think probably what's worth bringing up here, Darren, actually, before we move on to other examples is, if we just look at this graphic again, I think what's important to get across to people tuning in is just to quickly run through each of these. You've described marketplace. So, what we consider as marketplace is the way in which you use the supply chain, both up and down, engaging with customers as well as suppliers, to influence and to help raise awareness of the ways in which supply chain can be used for positive good. I've been doing some work recently with the University of Oxford, who are happy to talk about it, but they want to make sure that their spend has more positive impact as well. So really, for the sake of those tuning in, we're looking at marketplace, all sorts of ways in which businesses can use the way they trade to have a more positive impact. Then looking to workforce as well. And what was interesting in what you described, Darren, was that the way in which what one thing you're doing is actually influencing quite a lot of these topics. You know, workforce, the ways in which we're engaging and embracing and developing our staff. You know, as you say, people want to work for organisations that are doing this stuff. And perhaps we might talk a bit more about that with Ian as well. Environment, that's fairly obvious, really. You know, we want to reduce our negative impact on the environment. Community, the ways in which we engage with communities. And I think one of my frustrations is, whilst I've done a lot to support the voluntary sector, and businesses are engaging with charities, quite a lot of businesses see engagement with charities as where corporate social responsibility starts and ends. But lots of different ways businesses are part of their community and can engage and support communities. And then finally, governance, you know, the ways in which businesses have run. And that can be anything from just really, employees having a say in the business, the ways in which that perhaps businesses like B Corps actually embed in their articles of association a commitment to this stuff as well. And even employee ownership. And we've seen some good examples recently of employee ownership. So sorry I should have covered that earlier, but just really for the sake of those watching, that's the sort of way in which we're talking about this. So to come back to the most important people, yourselves, Ian, is there something you'd like to chip in on in terms of those topics?
Certainly, I think, Grant, the workforce agenda, as you would expect, is vital in any business, and certainly supporting the employees across an organisation, be it from the top down, in developing their culture and ways of working in the new world, really. I think the last 18 months, 2 years have been quite difficult for companies, organisations across all sectors, really, to adjust. And I think that's what the vital part of adjusting is, getting the mindset of the staff known, and to support staff in ways of working that are going to be potentially new to them. And I think that's something we absolutely endorse with all of our clients. Is really at the heart of it, it is the people that make the business. And so supporting those employees across that business model in different ways is vital to any business to prosper and develop. So growing your own, certainly we have a model of growing our own. So we've just taken on for instance, an apprentice, and she's starting her career in HR. She hadn't thought of that beforehand. Was attracted to our kind of business model and ways of working, and that culture of it's all, we're all in together, and knowing that one size doesn't fit all for each company. We want to ensure that each individual member of staff has that journey mapped out and supported in their development programs. So, and we have an example, Grant, you'll have been on a session a couple of weeks ago when we had one of our an apprentice who's now flourished into a senior consultant within our organisation.
So, he was brilliant, tremendous.
Yeah, and that absolutely fills me with pride. Certainly, Jonna, the owner, absolutely with pride of seeing those people get to where they want to be in that journey of discovery that we're on with them. So if you take that as our kind of philosophy, that's what we try to work with our clients on, really. It's knowing their staff and getting the best out of them in this different world.
Yeah. And Mike, this is something that you've, Jennings, it's very much embedded in your culture, isn't it? And you talk a lot about values in the workforce. And do you want to say something about that at Jennings as well?
Oh yeah, I'm sure this is affecting what you do, Ian, but it's been very close to our methodology for 20 years or more. Is that people grow with you, and one of the most, I'm sure you'll agree, one of the most fulfilling parts of running a business is watching your staff grow in self-esteem and self-belief and self-confidence, and it's magical to see that happening. And we've had, I would say very proudly, that pretty well every member of the team and past members of the team, people who've left, have all grown in stature and their abilities in what they can do. And often they come to us not knowing that they can do anything. And typically, if we employ a receptionist, they think they're going to be on reception forever. And you just by stretching them, giving them an opportunity to do something which they've never done before, which puts them outside of their comfort zone, right? And I'm sure this is reflecting what you do, and they think they can't do it to start with, and when you allow them to get on with it, talk to them about the objective, not how to get there, and allow them to do it in their own way to give them a bit of autonomy, and then when they achieve it, you can see the lights go on, their eyes brighten up, and they stand a bit taller when they're walking. And I've known receptionists who, oh, sorry, the show's is real, right? the real meaning of chat shows. And they change their demeanor, the way they speak to people as they come in, the way they dress, even makeup and so on. It sounds a bit sexist, but it's, everything changes because they become more self-confident. And then when they do that, they start to become more leadership quality, more entrepreneurial. They start to push the boundaries and want to do things they wouldn't otherwise have thought they could do. And that's where the magic happens, because then they can stretch into, we give them choices of what would you like to do? Were you interested in finance, in marketing, property management, and each business can select, the areas where those people, if there's potential, if there's a possibility, if they want to, of course, and if there's potential for expansion. And for me, it's felt like what's been important for me is, how do I expand the business so that all these wonderful people can still have a job? We can afford to pay them all. But that's the model that we've run, and it's been fantastic. I really loved it.
I think this is brilliant, but what we need to be careful of, the whole idea of this episode, it was to give a whistle-stop tour, and what it demonstrates we can, and we probably will have an episode purely on this. So I think for those that are watching that relate to some of the things you've said or want to find out more, then please do get in touch with us. We'll give you details at the end, because we'd love to involve you in a future episode.
I do have a question now, Grant, for Ian. Yeah. And one for Darren, actually. And you're talking about flexible working and people coming back to work after this COVID lockdown experience and working from home and so on. And I've heard on the news or picked it up on LinkedIn and so on, where there are some large companies insisting that all their staff have to come back to the office. And it seems to me there's a difference between, are you going to be a kind of business which dictates to your staff what they can and can't do? Or are you going to be one where you say, what would you like to do? Where would you like to work? What is best for you? And we'll fit the business in around that. Have you experienced anything around that amongst your clients and yourself?
Thanks, Mike. And I think those extremes are being played out across certainly the country, if not the world, potentially, because yes, you'll have big corporates that will have a significant, will have a way of working that is very traditional, and even with a pandemic behind them, they still want to work in a certain way. And other companies that have embraced a different culture and a different way of working. And we have all of those extremes. I think at the heart of working through that is, from our perspective, is knowing that company and knowing the company's journey, and now having that influence and discussion at the outset, really, around their thoughts, their feelings, and their direction of travel, and work with other options to put in the mix, really, because they potentially could not or may not have considered the benefits of a new way of working, a different way of working, an agile way of working, whatever you want to call it, because ultimately a business is wanting to gain the best out of their employees. So the environment they work in and how they work is vital to that kind of productivity and enthusiasm for that employee. So I think in the round, it's about discussing that with the individual company and therefore their employees. So not one size fits all, I don't think is what we would propose. It's about individual companies, organizations working through that particular scenario to get to the point of where it works for everybody.
Yeah.
And clearly, Mike, that there may be some people that will be on that journey and will, absolutely endorse it, and others that will struggle with that journey. And that's, I suppose, where we would work with that company, that employee, to work through those potential pitfalls. But ultimately, it's all about a conversation. It's all about working together in a collaborative way to look look to the future in ways that may have not been, as I say, considered in the past.
It's interesting, Mike, because you and I have talked about this over the years, and I definitely come from a command and control background, which is a phrase I think I picked up from you. And for me, it was always about, I would like to think I was a caring employer. When I was an employer, I was a caring employer, but it was, this is the business, this is how we operate. Do you want to be part of it or don't? And if you do, you play by the rules, And I have to say that's probably gets deep rooted into my childhood, but let's not go there. But, certainly over the years, and particularly working in the space that I do now, I've just learned so much, and I've learned the fact that, the ways in which this makes for a better business, and makes for in all sorts of different ways. So I think it's a great question. I don't know if you wanted to extend that to, did you ask that of Darren? Darren, do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, I'll contribute. My experience with my team. I mean, we've got a mix of family and long-serving members of the team that have been there over 20 years. So for us, getting the compromise of actually running a facility, having a building operational facility with goods in, goods out, and deliveries happening every day, and having that home working element as well to be supported to keep social distancing in play. I think I've got the balance of keeping all of the parties happy, but obviously being understanding of their individual case or concern, their side of the fence, if that's the other side of home. I've got single parent families working from home. I've got obviously people coming back to work. My sister's just coming back to work from maternity leave. That's going to be a whole world of change when she returns. What's happened in the last year that I've missed? And she's got anxiety and worries and stresses about returning to work and leaving kids. So there's loads of stuff on the other side of the fence that, from a well-being and a mental health point of view, as well as the sort of physical elements that we need to do in the office to make things comfortable, safe, and sorted for them. We just really need to listen on what they want and find a compromise. I think that's where I've put myself in a sort of position of listening and learning to be able to do the right thing for them is the right thing for the business, and vice versa.
I think you're right, Darren, absolutely. Listening and understanding is absolutely vital in this arena, really, because people have been behind closed doors, isolated potentially for a number of months, and then you've got to come back to the office. That's a massive change in mentality and what you've been used to for a number of months. So absolutely, that journey needs to be carefully managed, but through that engagement and listening and understanding of that particular employee's requirements, because they could be different.
Yeah.
I'm conscious it's a very important topic, this, but a very big topic. And I think, bearing in mind we want to try and do a whistle-stop tour, I think let's move on, and hopefully we've whet the appetite of people watching that want to take part in perhaps a deeper dive into this going forward. So, through Darren, we talked about the marketplace, the ways in which businesses can do so. And again, only just touched on that. That's a topic in itself. Workforce, we've clearly talked about. We've touched on environment a bit, in terms of reducing impact, but something that, in all of this work, Mike will tell you that, whilst I come from a background of getting into this through community engagement of businesses, I try to spend a lot of time on other topics because I want to help businesses understand of the ways in which we've just talked about. But we can't not talk about community. And looking at the screen, in terms of the people I'm looking at, you do a tremendous amount in the community. And even recently, Ian, there was someone who wanted some support from a charity around their employees, and you were fantastically open and welcome to have just a free, no obligation call to help them along the lines. And Darren, you do tremendous. I mean, you do other stuff as well, Ian. I know that. And Darren, you've done lots of different things. And we were all on the call recently for Twin Town Challenge, for instance. So do you two want to talk about, and Mike, I mean, we can't not talk about Jennings and all the stuff it does and stuff, but so do you want to chip in and sort of talk about why you engage, how you engage, and what that does for the business?
Yeah, sure. Again, we've actually just from a reference point of view, we've just released the 10 reasons to sort of stick local, and a couple of those reasons are building a sense of community and getting involved in charitable events and supporting schools and obviously local businesses, people homeschooling back in the pandemic time. And also just, I think, a theme that within that top 10 list of things to consider is just supporting your neighbour, supporting the local businesses that surround us. We just had a local business move in across the road. It's a female only gym that's just taken occupancy across the road from us, and their female participants in the evening were parking half a mile down the road and walking to the car park, and it's quite dark and it can be a little bit eerie. So they ask the question, can we use your car park? And just little things like that. It's just, it's not a problem. Absolutely. We're not using it at night time, crack on. So things like that. So, you know, community, support your neighbour, building the sense of community, which I know absolutely Jennings live and breathe, and it's infectious listening to Mike and what he's, you know, instilled and still living and through with the Jennings team. So this, all this stuff that we've learned over the last year, we're now just trying to make sure we're doing absolutely all we can to support everybody. A holistic circle of circular economy, as we've talked about, so business, community, environment, and people.
I think, Darren, yeah, to echo that, it's the little things that really do count, and that consistency, but that willingness. Grant, you mentioned, you know, I think it was on the Tuesday, there was a call out by yourself, and on the Friday we'd had that conversation. It was that kind of engagement when there was a call to arms and a cry for help almost. And I think that's our ethos and our way of working, is that, you know, we're always contactable, and we're always wanting to provide that, you know, support for those in need. And, you know, at the last year and a half, you know, the additional kind of hours alongside the support we've been giving to our charity partner, Homeless Oxfordshire, and also our Nexus partner, Sobel Health, you know, we've, you know, developed, you know, hundreds of hours of free time support, and that's what we will continue to do, because I think we're all in it together, I suppose, and that's vital from our perspective, is to maintain that community infrastructure links and presence. So if we're here to support, and we will continue to do that in little ways or big ways.
And then you mentioned Nexus. Actually, it's probably a good opportunity to talk about that. You know, B4's been great at developing this idea of Nexus, and you know, I think it was already established, but it also took on board an initiative that the Community Foundation had set up called Reciprocate, which came out of one of the High Sheriff's tenures. So there's been a lot of good stuff. You know, there's partnerships. Both of you have got partnerships with local charities. Darren, you and Seesaw, and as you've said, Ian, you and Sobel. And the thing that we're keen to do with that as well, not only to create more partnerships, but really help people make the most of those partnerships. You know, yes, charities need money and they need some volunteers, but there's so many other great examples, and we'll be exploring that a bit more. So I think we've only got a few minutes left. So really, just to sort of finish off, I mean, I think what you know, if we can perhaps just take a minute to glance at the graphic again. If you were to sort of talk about how this as a business is sort of evolving for you, and how you see it changing, and either the reasons why you're doing it, or how you see this continuing to develop. Do you want to talk about that? And feel free, Mike, obviously, to chip in as well. But Darren or Ian, do you want to talk about that holistic, much more holistic view about the way businesses are operating now that's different than it was before?
Yeah, got this, got the graphic. So I mean, for us, all of these things, they're all vitally important in their own areas, but together they just obviously help encompass a greater, more purposeful drive to the business. And so the people on board with the direction of the company, we're all on the same journey, trying to deliver wherever possible within these sections. How we go about doing our business, and our sort of the purpose behind what we do now. It sort of enhances what we've done in the past. It just makes it more real, and people can connect with that if we just keep the sort of list of things very simple and very focused, and repeatable. So sort of rinse and repeat, making sure that we're improving and developing, supporting, listening, learning, and just really helping that sort of circular economy of local business in its entirety.
And just before you chip in, Ian, really, I think the important thing to get across here is, this is just an initial draft. We've just put a few examples. There's so many more examples that we'll look to unpick and unfold as these series of episodes continue. And I think it's a great sort of principle for people to say, well, and I think the other thing to accept is there's certain things businesses can't do for one thing or one reason or another, but others that they can really. So yeah, Ian, any thoughts on that holistic position really?
Well, I think it's just that. It's the pillars that we would aspire to and reference in our business model. So our forward plan, our strategy, these pillars, I think, do give real meaning to a business, and should be reflected in those internal conversations that we will certainly be having around, what else, and using these pillars as maybe a driver for change and development of our organisation. And I'm sure other businesses can follow suit in maybe recognising what it is to be, what is the real meaning of their business.
Yeah, no, very good. And Mike, Jennings is on the B Corp journey, looking at the potential of becoming a B Corp, and so you've done a lot of work in these areas as well. I mean, more in terms of that B impact assessment, but generally in terms of the way you operate. I mean, these are very familiar to you in terms of the business.
Oh yeah, it's for me, it's really deeper than that. It's more rounded than these 5 items on the graphic. It's more about what do you think business is really for? And in the past, I think it's been relatively clear back in the 80s and before, business is there to make money. That's the purpose of business back then, the loads of money kind of era, the Thatcherism. And it's changed, and it's the younger generation particularly that are now driving that change, and people who are more enlightened are recognizing that really business is about people, and it's about building relationships with people, and when you start doing that and you do that well, then profit becomes an outcome rather than an objective. And I say people because all of these items are about people. The environment is ultimately, you're looking after your environment because you're living in it and your staff are living in it. We want to we want our children to live in it. So it's always all about people. And so I think my message to anyone listening in on this is think about your own business and think about it. If it's not, if making money is not, it's always going to be an objective, but if it's not going to be if you change it from being a primary objective to a minor objective, or think of it in terms of poverty and abundance. So if you're struggling to earn a living, then you're going to focus on it. But if there's enough coming in, you don't need to worry too much about that. You can start thinking about the other stuff that's important in life, and it's stuff that you can be proud to tell your grandchildren about, when you're in your dotage, as I'm getting close to. What am I proud of about what I've achieved in the business? That's what makes the amount of money made. It doesn't cut it. Who cares about that, really?
I think there's quite a lot. No, but there's quite a lot of people that talk about the topic, and certainly, I mean, one of them, so many, is Simon Sinek, who always talks about, profit isn't the reason for business, it's a consequence, it's a result of the business as well. And I think the other thing really to round off, just like you've said, for those watching, we all know, and we're seeing more and more as evidence today, really, that people want to work for organizations like this. They want to buy from organizations like this. They want to actually increasingly invest in organizations like this. And we're actually seeing, I mean, I don't just want to do business with anyone. People want to actually only sell to like-minded businesses as well. So, who wouldn't want to run a business in these ways? So I think we're pretty much out of time now, but that's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. I never tire of talking about this topic, and to be able to relate it, with some really good exemplars is just, I'm very proud of that. And I think hopefully the more people watching this will be having some light bulbs come on. So we would say to everybody, as you've said, Mike, if you're watching this and you're interested to be involved or share some of your stories or learn more, do get in touch. Probably the easiest way is email info@b4.com. We'd love to host you on a future episode and cover some of these topics in more detail. So thanks very much indeed for watching.